Ezra, at 37 years old, earned a steady salary of $63,000 a year as a pharmacy technician at the sprawling UC Davis Medical Center. It was a good job, a noble one, filling prescriptions that saved lives, but it was not a job that bought the kind of life his wife, Tasha, displayed on her social media. He knew this because on a warm Sacramento evening, standing in his brother-in-law's backyard, he was living through the devastating culmination of that discrepancy. The air in the meticulously landscaped land park garden was thick with the scent of jasmine and grilled steak, a sweet and savory perfume for the 40 guests mingling on the custom-built redwood deck. It was his sister-in-law Aaliyah's 35th birthday party, and her husband Trey had spared no expense. A three-piece jazz trio played softly near a shimmering pool, their music a gentle counterpoint to the cheerful clinking of glasses filled with a $75 a bottle champagne that Ezra knew he could never justify buying. He felt a familiar pang of inadequacy, a quiet hum of anxiety beneath the surface of his polite smiles. Tasha stood beside him, a vision in a white silk dress that cost, he knew from the credit card alert he'd received, exactly $780. Her deep brown skin was luminous under the professionally installed string lights, and her hair, freshly straightened and styled into a sleek bob, framed a face that was, at that moment, a mask of serene determination. He had no idea what was coming. Trey, a man whose success in commercial real estate was as loud as his diamond-studded watch, raised his glass. "To my amazing wife Aaliyah," he began, his voice booming with a practiced confidence that always made Ezra feel smaller. 35 years of making the world a better, more beautiful place. The guests murmured their approval. Aaliyah, her elegant locks, adorned with small gold cuffs that caught the light, beamed at her husband. She looked happy, truly happy, in their $1.2 million home, surrounded by friends and the trappings of a life well lived. Ezra felt Tasha shift beside him. He reached for her hand, a reflexive gesture of marital solidarity, but she subtly pulled away. Before Trey could continue his toast, Tasha stepped forward, clearing her throat. A few heads turned. The jazz trio, sensing a shift, softened their melody until it was barely a whisper. "If I could just say something," Tasha said, her voice clear and carrying across the deck. It wasn't loud, but it had a strange, formal quality that silenced the remaining chatter. Every eye settled on her. She looked radiant and composed, a portrait of grace. She did not look at Ezra. "I want to thank Aaliyah and Trey for having us all here tonight. It's a beautiful party," she started, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "And in the spirit of celebrating new beginnings, I have one of my own to announce." She paused, letting the silence stretch, building the drama. Ezra felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He saw Aaliyah's brow furrow in confusion. Tasha finally turned her head, her dark eyes locking onto Ezra's for the first time. The warmth he usually found there, or at least the memory of it, was gone. In its place was a chilling, impersonal finality. "Ezra and I are separating," she announced to the 40 stunned faces staring back at her. "Effective immediately. This is over." The words hung in the jasmine-scented air, brutal and absolute. The sound of a fork clattering onto a plate was like a gunshot. 40 pairs of eyes, which had been on Tasha, now swiveled to him. He could feel their gazes like physical blows. Pity from some, morbid curiosity from most. He was no longer a guest. He was the spectacle. His wife of 8 years had just broken up with him in the middle of her sister's birthday party, and he was the last to know. Have you ever had a moment where your entire world shatters, not with a bang, but with a quiet public humiliation? Share your story in the comments below, because sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward healing. The facade of their life had been built on such small, sturdy bricks of normalcy that Ezra hadn't seen the cracks forming. Their duplex in Curtis Park, with its modest $1,800 monthly rent, was a cozy, lived-in space. The walls were painted a warm sage green he'd chosen himself, and the small backyard was his sanctuary, a carefully tended plot of earth where he grew tomatoes, zucchini, and herbs. He drove a 2014 Honda Civic with 157,000 miles on it, a reliable car that he maintained himself, changing the oil every 5,000 miles in their shared driveway. He was a man of routines, of simple, tangible pleasures. Tasha was different. She craved the shine, the gloss, the life perpetually curated on Instagram feeds. She worked in marketing for a local tech startup, earning a respectable $85,000 a year. But she spent it as if it were twice that. Her closet was a testament to this, filled with brands Ezra only knew from the alarming credit card statements he was responsible for paying off. There was the $2,400 Burberry trench coat she'd bought for a trip to San Francisco they never took, the collection of Michael Kors purses, each one costing upwards of $400, and the shoes, so many shoes. Their boxes stacked like trophies of a life he couldn't quite afford for her. He tried. He worked overtime shifts at the hospital pharmacy, the fluorescent lights of the clean room buzzing in his ears until midnight, just to make sure the $1,100 monthly payment on her white BMW 3 Series was always on time. That car, a $43,000 symbol of her aspirations, sat in the driveway next to his aging Honda like a silent judgment. He cooked dinner almost every night, finding a quiet satisfaction in the methodical chopping of vegetables and the sizzle of garlic in olive oil. He'd pack her a lunch for the next day, a small act of service that felt like love. "You're the best, babe," she'd say, kissing his cheek before grabbing the lunch container and her $800 designer tote bag and heading out the door. Her girl time with Aaliyah had started innocently enough about 2 years ago. At first, it was once every few weeks. "Aaliyah needs me," she'd say. "Trey is working late, and she gets lonely in that big house." Ezra, who adored his sister-in-law, never questioned it. He liked the close bond the sisters shared. He'd use those evenings for himself, watching a documentary on PBS or spending hours in his garden, the rich Sacramento soil cool under his fingertips. He found peace in the quiet, but the frequency increased. Soon it was every Tuesday. Then Tuesdays and Thursdays. Sometimes a weekend night would be added. "Aaliyah's having a hard time," Tasha would explain vaguely, texting on her $1,200 iPhone 14 Pro, her thumbs a blur across the screen. "We're just going to watch movies and drink wine." The explanations became shorter, the details scarcer. When he'd ask what movie they watched, she'd wave a hand dismissively. "Oh, some silly rom-com, I don't even remember the name." He remembered one specific Tuesday about 6 months before the party. He'd made her favorite dish, shrimp scampi with fresh pasta, using basil from his garden. He'd bought a $15 bottle of Pinot Grigio to go with it. At 6:47 p.m., she texted, "So sorry, babe. Aaliyah just called in a crisis. Have to run over there. Don't wait up." He looked at the perfectly cooked shrimp, the steam rising from the pasta. He ate his portion alone at their small dining table, the second plate sitting opposite him, growing cold. He put her plate in the fridge, covered in plastic wrap. She came home after midnight, smelling not of wine, but of a faint, unfamiliar men's cologne he couldn't place. When he asked if Aaliyah was okay, she sighed with theatrical weariness. "She's fine, just drama with Trey's family. You know how it is." She didn't touch the shrimp scampi. It sat in the fridge for 3 days before he finally threw it away. The waste felt more painful than the rejection. It was a small thing, a plate of food. But it felt like a symbol of all the effort he was pouring into a vessel that was leaking from the bottom. The cruelty wasn't always overt. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a slow erosion of his confidence administered with a casual smile. Tasha had perfected the art of the backhanded compliment, the dismissive laugh, the public correction that made him feel like a child. The outrage accumulated not in a single volcanic eruption, but in layers of compressed ash. There was the dinner party they'd hosted for two of her work colleagues, a sleek couple who worked in finance and spoke in a language of stock options and quarterly earnings. Ezra had spent all day cooking, preparing a slow-braised beef brisket that cost him $65 at the local butcher shop. He'd paired it with roasted root vegetables from his garden and a rich, homemade gravy. He was proud of the meal. As he served the brisket, Tasha's colleague, a man named Marcus, remarked, "This is incredible, Ezra. You could open a restaurant." Ezra smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "Thanks, I just enjoy cooking." Tasha laughed, a light tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, don't encourage him," she said, waving her fork. "His big dream is to own a food truck. Can you imagine? Me, the wife of a food truck guy." She said it as a joke, and the others chuckled politely. But Ezra felt the barb land. He saw his simple, honest passion reframed as something embarrassing, something beneath her. He spent the rest of the dinner in near silence, the taste of his carefully prepared brisket turning to ash in his mouth. His salary was a frequent target. $63,000 a year was a solid, middle-class income in most places. But in Tasha's world of tech startups and real estate moguls, it was a pittance. She never missed an opportunity to remind him of it. One Saturday afternoon, they were at a home improvement store, looking for a new garden hose. He picked up a sturdy, reliable one for $49. She pointed to a high-end coiled model with brass fittings. It was $129. "Let's get this one," she said. "It looks so much better." "Tash, it's a garden hose," he said gently. "This one works just fine. It's the same one my dad has used for 10 years. She rolled her eyes, a gesture of profound disappointment. "Of course it is," she muttered, just loud enough for him to hear. She turned to him, her voice dripping with condescension. "Ezra, sweetie, sometimes you have to spend a little to get quality, but I guess you wouldn't understand that. It's fine. We'll get your little $63,000 a year hose." The words, spoken in the middle of a crowded aisle, made his face burn. She walked away, leaving him standing there with the perfectly functional green hose in his hands, feeling like the cheapest man on earth. He bought the $49 hose, but the victory felt hollow, tainted by her scorn. The worst moments were when she weaponized her affair, long before he even knew it was happening. Her constant companion was her phone, a glowing portal to a world he wasn't part of. She'd sit on their $1,500 crate and barrel sofa, a piece of furniture they were still paying off, and smile at something on the screen. A deep, genuine smile he rarely saw directed at him anymore. "Who are you texting?" he'd ask, trying to sound casual. "Just Aaliyah," she'd reply instantly, her eyes not leaving the phone. "She's sending me the funniest memes." He started to notice Trey's presence in their lives, even when he wasn't there. At family gatherings, Trey would always find a way to be near Tasha, a hand on the small of her back as she passed, lingering just a second too long, a shared joke that made them both laugh with an intimacy that excluded everyone else. Ezra, a man who trusted deeply and loved his family, told himself he was imagining things. He told himself Trey was just being a friendly brother-in-law. To suspect anything more would be to admit a monstrous possibility, not just about his wife, but about the husband of a woman he cared for, like a sister. What she didn't know would eventually destroy her, and he had no idea he would be the one to deliver the news. The final layer of betrayal was her dismissal of his grief. A year prior, Ezra's mother passed away after a long illness. She had been his rock, a kind, wise woman who loved Tasha like a daughter. In the months after her death, Ezra was adrift in a sea of sorrow. He needed his wife. One evening, he was sitting in his mother's old armchair, a worn, floral print piece he'd brought to their duplex, looking through a photo album. He found a picture of himself as a boy, sitting on his mother's lap. A wave of grief hit him so hard it took his breath away. Tears streamed down his face. Tasha walked into the room, took one look at him, and sighed. It was a sigh of impatience, of utter emotional exhaustion, not with her own life, but with his. "Ezra, are you still crying about that?" she asked, her voice devoid of sympathy. "It's been 6 months. Don't you think it's time to move on? It's getting a little draining, you know." He looked up at her, his vision blurred by tears. The woman he had married, the woman who had held his hand at the funeral and promised to be there for him, was telling him his grief was an inconvenience. In that moment, something inside him broke. The love he had fought so hard to protect began to curdle into something else, something cold and hard. He didn't know it yet, but that was the moment he stopped fighting for her. He just hadn't started fighting for himself. The discovery came not from a dramatic confrontation, but from the sterile, emotionless lines of a credit card statement. It was a Thursday morning, 7:15 a.m., and Ezra was paying their monthly bills online before his shift at the hospital. He did this every month, tracking their expenses in a simple Excel spreadsheet he'd created. It was the only way to stay on top of the debt Tasha so casually accumulated. He sipped his black coffee, the screen of his 4-year-old Dell laptop glowing in the dim morning light of their kitchen. He was clicking through the charges on their shared Visa card when a line item made him pause. A charge from 2 weeks prior. The Citizen Hotel, $482.50. He frowned. The Citizen was a boutique hotel downtown, known for its swanky rooftop bar and expensive rooms. He knew for a fact they hadn't stayed there. He checked the date. It was a Tuesday. He cross-referenced it with his own calendar. It was the night Tasha had supposedly rushed off to be with Aaliyah, the night of the crisis. A cold tendril of suspicion snaked around his heart. It was a feeling so ugly and unfamiliar that he tried to push it away. There had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd booked a room for a visiting colleague from her company's corporate office. Maybe she'd bought a gift certificate for someone. He scrolled through his text messages with Tasha from that day. There was her text at 6:47 p.m., the one about Aaliyah needing her, nothing else. His hands felt clammy. He decided to do something simple, something to dispel the growing dread. He would just ask Aaliyah. He picked up his phone and composed a text, carefully wording it to sound as casual as possible. "Hey Aaliyah, quick question. Was Tasha with you a couple Tuesdays ago? The 14th? She mentioned you were having a rough night and I wanted to make sure you were doing okay." He sent the message and his heart began to pound against his ribs. He watched the 3 dots appear and disappear. The wait was agonizing. A minute later, his phone buzzed. Aaliyah's reply was cheerful and completely innocuous, which made it all the more devastating. "Hey, Ezra. That's sweet of you to ask, but I'm fine. I think she got her dates mixed up. The 14th was our anniversary. Trey and I went to Ella for dinner, and we're home by 10. We haven't had a girls' night in ages. We should all get together soon." Ezra read the message once, then twice. The words swam before his eyes. She got her dates mixed up. We haven't had a girls' night in ages. The casual tone, the friendly exclamation points, the complete and utter demolition of his reality. She wasn't with Aaliyah. She had lied. And on Aaliyah and Trey's anniversary, of all nights. Where was she? The $482.50 charge from the Citizen Hotel provided the sickening, irrefutable answer. He felt the air leave his lungs. He sat at his small kitchen table, the coffee in his $12 ceramic mug growing cold, and the pieces began to click into place with horrifying clarity. The late nights, the constant texting, the vague explanations, the scent of men's cologne, the intimacy with Trey. The name slammed into his consciousness like a physical blow. Aaliyah said she was with Trey that night, but Tasha was at a hotel. The lie wasn't just Tasha's. The scope of the betrayal suddenly expanded, becoming monstrous. It wasn't just his wife. It was his sister-in-law's husband. They were doing this together. To him? To Aaliyah? The feeling was not rage. Not yet. It was a profound, hollowing emptiness, a visceral understanding that the last 8 years of his life, the foundation upon which he had built everything, was a lie. He stood up, his legs unsteady, and walked into their bedroom. Tasha was still asleep, her face peaceful, angelic in the morning light. He looked at the woman he loved, the woman who was a complete stranger to him, and felt nothing but a vast, cold silence. He had the truth. Now he had to decide what to do with it. The days that followed were a masterclass in strategic restraint. Ezra moved through his life with a chilling, newfound sense of purpose, his grief and rage channeled into a cold, methodical calm. He was an actor playing the part of the loving, oblivious husband, and he deserved an award for his performance. On the outside, he was the same Ezra. On the inside, he was a detective, a strategist, a man gathering the evidence that would dismantle the life his wife had so carefully constructed. The morning after his discovery, he made Tasha coffee, just as he always did. He handed her the mug, their fingers brushing. "Morning, babe," he said, his voice even. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby," she said, stretching. "I was so tired last night." She was lying. He knew from the credit card statement that she had bought 2 glasses of wine at a bar downtown before coming home. A $32 charge he hadn't noticed before. He just nodded, the lie hanging between them, invisible to her, suffocating to him. That afternoon, during his lunch break at the hospital, he made a phone call that changed everything. He found a private investigator online, a man named Frank Miller with a small, discreet office on J Street. Frank's website was no frills, his rates clear. $150 an hour, plus expenses. Ezra transferred a $2,000 retainer from his personal savings account, the one he'd been building for a down payment on a small house. The irony was not lost on him. "What do you need, mister?" "Henderson." Frank's voice was gravelly, professional. "I need you to follow my wife, Tasha Henderson," Ezra said, his voice low as he stood in a quiet corner of the hospital courtyard. "And a man named Trevin Maxwell. I believe they're having an affair." He gave Frank their photos, work addresses, and the license plate numbers of Tasha's white BMW and Trey's black $90,000 Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. He went home that evening and played his part. Tasha announced she was going out. "Just grabbing a drink with some girls from work," she said, pulling on a pair of $300 Stuart Weitzman heels. "Don't wait up." "Okay, have fun," he said, looking up from the book he was pretending to read. "Be safe." An hour later, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank. "Target 1, TH, is at the Shady Lady Saloon. Alone at the bar. Target 2, TM, just arrived. They've moved to a corner booth." Ezra's hand trembled as he read the words. He felt a sick satisfaction, the grim confirmation of his suspicions. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and went out to his garden. He pulled weeds with a furious, silent energy, his knuckles digging into the cool earth, until his anger subsided into a cold resolve. Each lie became a scene in his grim theater. The next day, Tasha came home with a new purse, a Kate Spade tote that cost $350. "It was a bonus from work," she said, beaming. "Aren't you proud of me?" "That's great, honey," he said, forcing a smile. He knew from Frank's initial report, delivered via a secure email, that she and Trey had spent 2 hours that afternoon at the Arden Fair Mall. He knew they'd had lunch at the Cheesecake Factory, a $78 charge on Trey's credit card, which Frank had managed to glimpse. The purse wasn't a bonus. It was a gift from her lover. The hardest part was feigning ignorance during conversations about Aaliyah and Trey. A week after hiring the PI, Tasha was on the phone with her sister, her voice full of false sympathy. "I know, it's so awful he has to work such long hours," Tasha cooed. "Poor you, all alone in that big house. Don't worry, I'll come over tomorrow night and keep you company." Ezra, who was in the kitchen making a sandwich, froze. He knew what tomorrow night meant. He checked his email. Frank had already confirmed it. A reservation for 2 at 7:30 p.m. at the Firehouse Restaurant in Old Sacramento, followed by a room booked under Trey's name at the nearby Kimpton Sawyer Hotel, a luxury establishment where rooms started at $550 a night. Tasha was going to lie to her sister's face, then leave to go sleep with her husband. The sheer audacity of it, the depth of the deception, was breathtaking. He had to fight every instinct to scream, to confront her, to throw the evidence in her face. But he held back. He remembered the calm, strategic advice of his lawyer. He had to let them build his case for him. So he just stood there, spreading mayonnaise on his bread. And when Tasha hung up, he asked, "Everything okay with Aaliyah?" "Yeah, she's just feeling a little neglected," Tasha said, shaking her head with a look of pity that was utterly fraudulent. "Trey is such a workaholic. I feel so bad for her." "You're a good sister," Ezra said, his voice a perfect imitation of sincerity. Inside, he felt nothing. The man who loved his wife was gone. In his place was a patient, calculating stranger, waiting for the perfect moment to let the truth fall like a guillotine. The meeting with the attorney took place on a Tuesday afternoon in a glass-walled office on the 15th floor of a downtown skyscraper. The view of the city was panoramic, but Ezra only saw the polished surface of the mahogany table. He had taken a half day of sick leave from the hospital, the lie tasting like bile in his mouth. He was becoming what he hated. The attorney, a sharp, impeccably dressed black woman in her 50s named Diane Davies, radiated a calm, formidable competence. Her fee was $450 per hour, a sum that made Ezra's stomach clench, but as she spoke, he knew every dollar would be worth it. He laid out the file on the table. It was a slim manila folder, but its contents were explosive. He had compiled everything: the initial credit card statement, his text exchange with Aaliyah, and the complete report from Frank Miller, the private investigator. The PI's work had been brutally efficient, costing a total of $3,200, which had wiped out most of Ezra's emergency fund. The report was 12 pages long, complete with time-stamped photographs. There they were, Tasha and Trey, captured in high-resolution color. A photo of them kissing in the parking garage of the Kimpton Sawyer Hotel. A picture of them holding hands as they walked into a dimly lit bar. A shot of Tasha getting out of Trey's Mercedes G-Wagon a block away from their duplex after one of her supposed girls' nights. The evidence was irrefutable, a meticulous documentation of a 2-year betrayal. Ms. Davies read through the report, her expression unreadable. She didn't flinch. She simply absorbed the facts. When she was finished, she looked up at Ezra, her eyes soft with something that looked like empathy, but was tempered with professional steel. "This is very thorough, Mr. Henderson. I'm sorry you're going through this. What are my options? Ezra asked, his voice hoarse. California is a no-fault divorce state, she explained, her tone crisp and businesslike. Which means the affair, legally speaking, doesn't entitle you to a larger share of the marital assets. Everything acquired during the marriage is considered community property and is typically split 50-50. Ezra's heart sank. So she gets half of everything? Even after this? Typically, Ms. Davies said. Then she leaned forward slightly. However, the law is one thing. Leverage is another. This, she tapped the PI's report, is leverage. A very powerful, very painful kind of leverage. Your wife and Mr. Maxwell have built their lives on a foundation of lies. A public revelation of this affair would be catastrophic for them, both socially and, in Mr. Maxwell's case, professionally. His wife, Aaliyah, comes from a prominent family, does she not? Ezra nodded. Her father is a respected surgeon. Exactly. A messy public divorce could be very damaging to Mr. Maxwell's business reputation. Tasha, in turn, would lose the support of her entire family. They will want this to go away quickly and quietly. That gives us a strong negotiating position. They spent the next hour mapping out the strategy. They would file for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. In the settlement proposal, they would demand that Ezra keep the duplex in its entirety, as his savings had made up the bulk of the down payment. They would demand that Tasha assume responsibility for all her personal debt, including the $28,000 remaining on her BMW loan and the $19,000 in credit card bills she had amassed. They would not ask for alimony. He would not offer it. It's an aggressive opening, Ms. Davies said. But given the circumstances, I believe they will accept it to avoid the alternative. The final piece of the plan was the most difficult. What about Aaliyah? Ezra asked, his voice cracking for the first time. She doesn't know. She's the other victim in this. She deserves to know the truth before this all blows up. Ms. Davies nodded slowly. I agree. But the truth must be delivered carefully, not in an angry phone call. It needs to be undeniable, so they can't manipulate her or try to gaslight her into believing it's a misunderstanding. They decided on the method. On Friday afternoon, the day before Aaliyah's birthday party, Ms. Davies's office would send a secure, password-protected email to Aaliyah's personal address. The email would be brief and professional, stating that they represented her brother-in-law, Ezra Henderson, in a pending marital dissolution. It would state that they had uncovered evidence of a long-term affair between Tasha Henderson and Trevin Maxwell. Attached to the email would be the full, unredacted report from the private investigator, including the photographs. She will receive this at approximately 3 p.m. on Friday, Ms. Davies said. That will give her time to process it before the party on Saturday. It will be a terrible shock, but it is better she hears it this way than being blindsided in a public forum. Ezra felt a wave of nausea. He was about to detonate a bomb in the heart of a family he loved. But it was a bomb Tasha and Trey had built, armed, and placed there themselves. He was just lighting the fuse. He left the lawyer's office feeling strangely empty, the weight of his decision settling upon him. He had a plan. He had the evidence. Now all he had to do was survive the next 48 hours. The scene in Aaliyah's backyard replayed in Ezra's mind, but now with a chilling, crystalline focus. The jazz music, the scent of jasmine, the 40 pairs of eyes, Tasha's voice clear and cold, slicing through the warm evening air. Ezra and I are separating, effective immediately. This is over. He saw it all from a distance now, as if he were watching a movie of someone else's life. He felt the collective intake of breath from the guests. He saw the shock on the faces of their friends, quickly replaced by the awkward, pitying glances that were worse than any overt insult. He saw Tasha, standing there in her $780 silk dress, basking in the drama she had created. She had chosen this stage, this audience, to deliver her final crushing act of humiliation. She expected him to crumble, to look weak, defeated, perhaps even to cry. She wanted to be seen as the strong one, the woman who was bravely ending a relationship that was no longer serving her. She had no idea she was the one standing on a trapdoor. He let the silence hang for a long moment, a silence so profound he could hear the fizzing of the champagne bubbles in a nearby glass. He did not look at Tasha. He did not give her the satisfaction of seeing his pain. Instead, he slowly, deliberately, turned his head and looked directly across the deck at Trey. Trey stood beside Aaliyah, his arm draped possessively around her waist. He had a look of faint, smug surprise on his face. He was watching the show, enjoying the public dismantling of his lover's husband. He thought he was a spectator. He was about to become the main event. Ezra's gaze locked with Trey's. He let a small, knowing, almost pitying smile touch his lips. He kept his voice low, calm, and perfectly clear. It wasn't a shout. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the quiet precision of a surgeon's scalpel. He said 3 words. Trey is watching. It was a simple sentence, grammatically nonsensical on its own, but in the context of that moment, it was devastating. For the guests, it was confusing, an odd non sequitur. For Tasha, it was a spark of alarm, her brow furrowing as she tried to decipher his meaning. But for Trey, it was a direct hit. The color drained from Trey's face. It was instantaneous and absolute, as if someone had pulled a plug at the base of his neck. His smug expression dissolved into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. His eyes, wide with horror, were fixed on Ezra. He knew. In that instant, Trey understood that his secret was out. The carefully constructed world of his $1.2 million house, his beautiful wife, his successful career, and his sordid affair was about to come crashing down around him. His hand, which was holding a crystal flute of champagne, began to tremble. But the most important reaction was Aaliyah's. She had been standing in stunned silence since Tasha's announcement, her face a mixture of confusion and concern for Ezra. But when Ezra spoke those 3 words, and when she saw the blood drain from her husband's face, something clicked. Her mind, already primed by the lawyer's email she had received 29 hours earlier, the email with the 12-page report and the high-resolution photographs, made the final terrible connection. Her head snapped from Trey's ashen face to her sister's. She saw not a sister offering comfort, but a co-conspirator. The girls' nights, the endless crises, the constant need for Tasha's support, it all coalesced into one monstrous, unbearable truth. Her husband and her sister, the 2 people she trusted most in the world. Aaliyah's hand flew to her mouth. A small, choked gasp escaped her lips. Her eyes, wide and brilliant with unshed tears, locked with Tasha's. In that silent, searing glance, Tasha finally understood. She saw the knowledge in her sister's eyes. She saw the PI report. She saw the photographs. She saw that Ezra knew everything. Her confident, triumphant posture collapsed. Her face went white. The entire party froze. The guests, sensing the shift from a simple marital drama to something much darker and more complex, held their breath. The jazz trio had fallen completely silent. The only sound was the gentle burble of the pool's waterfall feature, a serene soundtrack to a scene of utter devastation. Tasha had wanted a new beginning, and she had gotten one. It was the beginning of the end. The aftermath was not a slow unraveling. It was a detonation. The frozen tableau on the deck shattered when Aaliyah let out a sound that was not quite a scream, but a raw, ragged cry of pure betrayal. "Get out," she whispered. her voice trembling but filled with a sudden, terrifying strength. She was looking at Trey. "Get out of my house." Trey, still pale and trembling, started to stammer. "Baby, listen, it's not what you think." "I said get out." This time her voice was a roar. It echoed across the manicured lawn, shaking the polite facade of Land Park to its core. She shoved him, a surprisingly forceful blow that sent him stumbling backward. The guests scattered, murmuring, desperate to escape the blast radius of the disintegrating family. Tasha rushed to Aaliyah's side. "Aaliyah, calm down. Let's talk about this." "Don't you touch me," Aaliyah hissed, recoiling as if from a snake. She held up her phone, the screen glowing. On it was an image, one of the PI's photos, of Tasha and Trey kissing in the parking garage. "You want to talk about this? You want to explain this picture, Tasha? Or the dozens of others my brother-in-law was kind enough to send me?" The word brother-in-law was a dagger, and she twisted it. In that moment, she had chosen her side. She had chosen Ezra. Tasha's face crumpled. The game was over. She had lost everything in a single, perfectly executed strike. The consequences cascaded swiftly and brutally. Trey was thrown out of his own home that night, forced to check into the Residence Inn on Capitol Park Drive, a far cry from the luxury hotels where he conducted his affair. His G-Wagon was still in the driveway of the Land Park house, but Aaliyah had the locks changed the next morning. Aaliyah's father, the surgeon, personally called Trey's business partners. Within a week, Trey was forced to buy them out, a move that cost him over $400,000 in liquid capital and effectively dissolved his lucrative firm. His divorce from Aaliyah was swift and punishing. She kept the $1.2 million house and received half of their remaining assets, another $800,000. Trey was left with his debt and his ruined reputation. Tasha's downfall was just as complete. Her family, horrified by the dual betrayal, cut her off completely. Her mother wouldn't take her calls. Her father sent a single, curt text message. "You have brought shame on this family." Ostracized and alone, she couldn't afford the duplex on her own. Ezra's divorce settlement, which she signed without a fight to avoid the public filing of the PI report, was exactly what Ms. Davies had proposed. Ezra kept the duplex and all its equity. Tasha was left with her $43,000 BMW, the $28,000 she still owed on it, and her $19,000 in credit card debt. She was forced to sell the car at a loss and move into a cramped $1,400 a month apartment in a rundown building in North Sacramento, a world away from the Land Park luxury she had coveted. Her job, which relied heavily on social networking, became untenable. The story of what happened at the party spread like wildfire through their social circle. Within 2 months, she was let go, her company citing restructuring. Ezra, meanwhile, weathered the storm with a quiet dignity. He stayed in the Curtis Park duplex, the silence of the house a welcome balm. A week after the party, Aaliyah, her eyes red-rimmed but her spine straight, appeared at his door with 2 suitcases. "Can I stay here for a little while?" she asked, her voice small. "I can't stand the ghosts in that house." He welcomed her in without hesitation. They became unlikely roommates, 2 survivors navigating the wreckage of their lives. He cooked for her, simple, nourishing meals with vegetables from his garden. She helped him paint the living room a new, brighter color. They didn't talk much about what happened, but they didn't need to. Their shared grief and shared betrayal forged a new kind of family, a quiet, resilient bond built on the ashes of the old one. 1 year later, the Sacramento sun, warm and golden, filtered through the leaves of the large oak tree in Ezra's backyard. It was a Sunday morning in early October, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. The duplex in Curtis Park felt different now. It was calm, uncluttered, and entirely his. The sage green walls were gone, replaced by a cheerful, buttery yellow that Aaliyah had helped him pick out. His mother's old floral armchair still sat in the corner, but it no longer felt like a monument to grief. It was just a comfortable chair. Aaliyah had moved into her own condo in Midtown 6 months ago, a sleek, modern space that was all hers, but their bond remained. Every Sunday morning, they had a routine. At 9 a.m., she would arrive at his duplex, and they would walk the 10 blocks to the farmer's market under the freeway at 8th and W Streets. Today was no different. He heard her key in the lock, and she walked in carrying 2 reusable canvas bags. She had her locks tied up in a colorful scarf, and she wore a simple jeans and t-shirt. She looked peaceful, her luminous brown skin glowing in the morning light. The haunted look in her eyes was gone, replaced by a calm strength. "Ready for the market?" she asked, her smile easy and genuine. "Always," he replied, grabbing his own well-worn tote bag. They walked in comfortable silence, the sounds of the city waking up around them. The market was a vibrant explosion of life, the smell of kettle corn and fresh peaches, the sound of a lone guitarist playing a folk song, the riot of colors from heirloom tomatoes, purple kale, and bright orange pumpkins. They bought fresh bread from a local baker, cheese from a vendor who knew them by name, and a bouquet of sunflowers that looked like captured sunlight. As they walked back, sipping on iced coffees, Aaliyah nudged him. "I saw Trey last week," she said quietly. Ezra kept his eyes forward. "Oh yeah? How's he doing?" "He's lost a lot of weight," she said. "He's living in a small apartment in Roseville, working some sales job. He tried to apologize again." "What did you say?" Ezra asked. "I told him I forgive him," Aaliyah said. Ezra glanced at her, surprised. She met his gaze, her expression clear. "I forgive him for me, not for him. Holding on to that anger was like drinking poison and waiting for him to die. I'm done drinking poison." Ezra nodded, understanding completely. He had seen Tasha a few times from a distance. She was working as a waitress at a chain restaurant near the mall where she used to shop for designer purses. She looked tired, diminished, a ghost of the vibrant, ambitious woman she had been. He felt no anger, no satisfaction, only a profound and distant sadness for the person she might have been. He had forgiven her too, for the same reason Aaliyah had forgiven Trey, for his own peace. Back at his duplex, they sat in the backyard, arranging the flowers in a vase on his patio table. The garden was thriving. His tomato plants were heavy with fruit, and a new bed of herbs perfumed the air. He had built this life, this peace, with his own 2 hands, in the rich, dark soil of his own backyard. He realized that for years he had been measuring his worth by Tasha's standards, by a world of $43,000 cars and $1.2 million houses. He thought his $63,000 salary made him less of a man, but he was wrong. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or square footage. It's measured in peace of mind. It's the quiet satisfaction of a home you've made your own. It's the loyalty of family, the real family you choose, and that chooses you back. It's the simple, unshakable knowledge that your own character is the only asset that can never be taken from you. Life isn't about the grand gestures and the public declarations. It's about the small, steady acts of love and the quiet integrity with which you live your days. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is tend your own garden and let the weeds on the other side of the fence choke themselves out. What do you think is the most important ingredient for a happy life? Let us know in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of strength and resilience.